Well, welcome everybody. It's so great to have everybody here because this is a fairly new project for us, and you're here because you're going to help us figure out what we're supposed to be doing with this project moving forward. It's a work in progress for sure. I'll just let you know more or less how this webinar is going to be formatted. We're going to there's a few of us who've been working on this project since the beginning of the year, and we'll introduce ourselves very briefly. The rest of you, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're from, why you're interested in this, any information about why you're here and where you're coming from. We're then going to show a brief slide presentation, which will go over a little bit of an overview of this medicinal project in general, a couple slides, a recap of the field day that we held on Salt Spring Island at the beginning of July, and then a few slides about the variety trial that we're running this year. And then we're hoping to have everybody go into breakout rooms, and we've got a few questions that we're going to ask people to kind of brainstorm for us in breakout rooms. We'll then come back, summarize the breakout room answers, and then have a discussion and answer any questions that come up throughout the webinar. So just to start the webinar, we often start with a land acknowledgement. I just like to acknowledge that we're zooming in from all over the place. We actually had people from Ontario and Edmonton and other places on this continent join in. I don't know exactly who will be here. But often with a webinar like this, we're talking about exploring crops and seeds, and sometimes we talk about them as a commodity, something that we're hoping to produce and sell. And we've been reminded by a lot of Indigenous partners we've worked with that seeds and plants are a lot more than a commodity, something to be owned, and that they are to many people, and I believe to a lot of us, we consider them more ancestors as things that we have and that we own. So I'll just remind us to kind of think about that as we're talking about these things, even though we may talk about them as a commodity. Just keep in the back of your mind that these crops are here for us, and we need to treat them with respect, and as well the people who originated them and the areas that they're from. So I'll just start by introducing myself, and then I'll call on the other three people who've been part of the project to do a brief introduction. My name's David Katzel. I help manage the BC Seeds Security Program for Farm Folk City Folk with a team, and this project falls under that program, although it's a little bit different. We are, the seeds are very important to the medicinal plants, so that is definitely a strong element of this project. And I have been with Farm Folk City Folks since 2019, and this is an exciting new project that I'm interested in delving into. And Lisa, maybe you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure, I'm the seed coordinator on Vancouver Island and happy to support this project and learn and gain all the energy from all the people who are already involved. It's exciting to see that fresh energy in something. So, and I'll pass it over to Leah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leah. I am a UBC student, but I've been volunteering with Farm Folk City Folk since September last year. And in the beginning of the year, I joined David and Rupert and the Farm Folk City Folk crew with this new project, which is so exciting. And we've been moving, moving quickly with like lots of new opportunities and learning so much from everybody who we get in touch with. So I'm very excited. I'll pass it over to Rupert.
Hi, my name is Rupert Adams and working with the crew on this new project. I've been growing medicinal herbs for about just over 20 years now, medicinal herbs and seeds. And I worked with the Canadian Seed Initiative for 3 years. And I'm seeing a lot of similarities between that and starting up this project. But also working kind of in tandem with an initiative in the States which is around growing Asian medicinals, called the Lilium Initiative. So maybe we'll just jump right in here with the kind of talking about the kind of overview of the project. So the BC Medicinal Plant Seed Project. I guess we need the slideshow. Here we go. So there it is, the BC Medicinal Plant Seed Project. So that was a slide of the field day that we did in Salt Spring. We'll come to that in a minute. So yeah, just looking at the overview here, basically looking at medicinal herb and seed production in BC. One of the big things that we're trying to do is connect farmers and potential herb farmers and growers with health practitioners, and try and understand the needs of health practitioners and in general the medicinal plant market in British Columbia. And with that, in conjunction with the main reason why we're having field days and virtual field days, is to then develop, with input from all you folks that are here today, a strategy to grow existing medicinal herb network in BC and strengthen those links between growers and the health practitioners. So the reason why we kind of embarked on this project, or the opportunities that we kind of saw coming up, is that, I mean, one big thing is that the increase in sales in remedies and herbal products over the last, specifically the 4 or 5 years, COVID really pushed a big increase in sales of natural remedies, medicinal plants, and so on. So this huge increase in demand for organically and ecologically grown medicinal plants, and also this massive number of health practitioners we have in BC. We've been trying to get together a list of all the different health practitioners who we feel may have need of using medicinal plants, and it's huge. It really is. It's quite incredible, the number of alternative health practitioners in British Columbia. So then next, together with this increase in demand, there's also been a decreasing kind of confidence in medicinal plants that are coming from overseas. And this is due to several reasons: growing practices. A lot of the plant material that's being used, whether as raw herbs or in remedies, are not certified organic. And that raises some pretty big questions as to the growing practices. So that's one big reason. Mislabeling of products is another, of herbs coming into the country is another thing. And the poor quality. The quality is definitely been decreasing. We've been hearing that from practitioners, and that quality has been going down over the last several years. Another thing is there's an increasing growth in the knowledge and experience of growing medicinal plants. There's a lot more sharing being going on, even from places that have been notorious in the past for keeping secret growing techniques and harvesting techniques and so on. There's just a lot more sharing of information and knowledge going on, which is super helpful to be developing this project. And then also a growing awareness, or kind of reawareness, a reawakening of this knowledge of plant medicine that actually goes back thousands of years. Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, and they've been used, for thousands of years with incredible results. And one of the reasons why there was kind of a downturn in the use of herbal medicine or plant medicine was a conscious move to discredit natural medicine at the beginning of the last century. I won't get into that, but it's a very interesting topic to look at what happened when modern allopathic medicine and pharmaceutical industry consciously try to discredit the effectiveness of plant medicine. And finally, in this opportunity, we've been trying to find out where this comes from. I heard it from several different people. We're trying to find out if it really is the largest untapped agricultural market in North America. There are not a lot of medicinal herbs grown, and the actual market, as I said, through practitioners in North America, it's a massive untapped market. So the opportunity is definitely there, both for growers and for practitioners. So looking at kind of some of the goals that we're gonna looking into, but we also, as I said before, the reason we're having these webinars and field days is to get some feedback from growers and practitioners as to the direction we move. But these goals were kind of our initial goals, and we're kind of building on those and putting them out there to people to see how they feel and which feel more important, or which we need to put more energy into. So we're going to obviously looking into, from the point of view of growers and farmers, the economic feasibility of growing herbs, trying to supplement farmers and growers' incomes with a new income stream of growing medicinal plants. But as David said, we got to be careful about this commodification of something that is sacred, plants and medicine. And I think, as David pointed out, how a lot of us feel about plants. They're our allies. They're not there to be exploited. They're there to be worked with, and they're a gift on the planet for us all. So looking at the needs of farmers and growers to adopt growing techniques, to adopt growing medicinal herbs into their farmscape, and helping them to realize an extra maybe income stream. It is hard. Farming is still pretty hard. It's hard to make a good living. So the more different income streams a farmer or grower can utilize, the better. So looking at not just the medicinal plant side of things, but the seeds, which is super important. Looking at the current market for medicinal plants, we've already pointed out that it is a large untapped market for growing within British Columbia. Most practitioners on this call will definitely see that a lot of the herbal products they use are predominantly made with herbs, plants that are grown outside of BC. So there is definitely a market, and then identifying those herbal needs of health practitioners. If we're asking or suggesting to farmers that they grow certain herbs, but they're not in demand, there's not a lot of point in that. So trying to find out from practitioners what medicinal plants they're looking for, and also the feasibility of growing them in the different climatic zones of British Columbia. We have a pretty amazing growing climates in BC, so we can grow quite a wide range of medicinal herbs, not just indigenous herbs, but herbs from Europe, from Asia. So moving on there, something that is coming up quite often in our discussions and the feedback from people who are getting involved in the project is training. Training in the practice of growing, the practice of harvesting, and potentially creating a hub where people can come visit, do courses, and experience harvesting and all the different techniques for preparation. Some of the preparations for medicinal herbs in TCM are very specific, and practitioners will not buy unless the herbs are prepared in a certain way. So farmers and growers need to be kind of savvy with those techniques. And something that really is becoming super important, that comes up a lot, is if we're going to be growing these medicinal plants, then we have to have kind of secure sources of seed and germplasm. It was really interesting on the field day here on Salt Spring. There was something that I was growing that I was thought was a specific plant, and then after a conversation, it was deemed that it wasn't. So identifying germplasm and having reliable sources of germplasm is super, super important. So the foundation of potentially the foundation of a medicinal herb seed and germplasm bank. And then finally, looking at the potential, and this has come up a lot, it was a big part of the discussion with various people at the field day on Salt Spring, is a co-op where farmers are putting in their what herbs they're growing, and also practitioners are putting in what they're looking for, and then bringing those folks together and looking, as I said, forming some form of co-op. How that evolves is going to be up to all of us to kind of steer that. It's being worked on. As I said, I work for the Lilium Initiative down in the States, and they're already have started up a co-op listing for farmers what they have, and for practitioners sourcing fresh herbs. So that's kind of the overview of the project. And as I said, we did our first farm field day beginning of July, 4th of July, at Hope Hill Farm, which is where I'm now based. This is my first season growing here. I just moved back to Salt Spring in the winter and starting to grow a medicinal plant and seed farm. And it was a pretty amazing event. It really was inspiring. We had over 30 people attend, and the atmosphere was I don't know how I think there were some people here who were there, quite a few people. It was really exciting. Like, there was an air of excitement, and the response by the number of people attending was just really incredible. So we've definitely been overwhelmed, but in a good way, by the overall response to the project, and the interest that is out there is pretty phenomenal. So it's pretty amazing to have you all here. And this is some of the feedback that we got from the Salt Spring event. I'm thinking maybe we can look at this after more in depth anyway, when we come out of the breakout rooms that we're going to go into. But briefly, co-ops came up again. Education is super important, inclusivity and support of minorities, collaboration and knowledge exchange, which I mentioned earlier. And access to infrastructure was super important for farmers and growers, for harvesting and for drying and preparing the herbs. So I think maybe if when we come out of our breakout rooms, when we go into our discussion, we could bring this slide up again and involve that in our discussion there. But co-ops really did were featured quite a lot by folks at the field day. So one of the things that we identified pretty early on with any venture into plants and agriculture, variety trials are super, super important. because we sort of we kind of identified, as I said, we identified this as early on, and we went into a variety trial pretty quickly, basically to just get some trials going on. It's a very, very, very basic trial. I'm not sure how familiar some folks on the event right now are with variety trials, but they can be pretty involved, gathering a lot of information. But for this trial, we just basically wanted to have people, farmers, starting to grow some medicinal plants in various places throughout BC. So we have 7 participants, pretty widely spread out in different climatic zones throughout BC. And we just basically wanted to see how these herbs performed in these different areas. So we're using 2 different annuals and 2 perennials. And the reason we chose the herbs that we did, so we chose four different herbs. Or so there were 2 perennials, I said 2 perennials and 2 annuals. So there were quite a few reasons for choosing the plants that we chose. One thing that really, I grew a lot of food seeds, and food seeds are very easy to germinate. There's usually, there's an expectation of farmers and growers of food, which are predominantly annual crops, that they get very close to 100% germination. Germination rates are between 90 and 100%. This can be very different for especially perennial medicinals. Annual medicinals have been a little bit more manipulated by humans, but a lot of the perennial medicinals haven't had this human intervention as much as our annual food crops. So germination patterns are very different. So this is one of the reasons why we wanted to include leopard lily. It's an important medicinal in TCM, but it has very interesting germination rates, as people have experienced. It doesn't germinate all at once. It's a very, very gradual germination. And this is because a lot of the perennial medicinals still have their natural, inherent kind of fail-safe survival mechanisms in their seeds, in that the seeds germinate with changing environmental conditions. So they don't all germinate at once. As I said, that's a kind of survival technique that still is inherent in a lot of the medicinal perennials. So some people had some pretty interesting results with the leopard lily. I think it was probably between about 6 weeks to get probably between 75 and 80% germination, but they pop up very, very not sporadically. It'd be interesting to do a graph of germination over time. But it's also an incredibly beautiful flower. It produces flowers in the 2nd year, but also it can be pretty temperamental to different field conditions and different pests and predominantly slugs who love this plant as it comes up in the spring. So yeah, this was included to start showing some of the growers that, it's not 100% germination. It's a lot of the perennial medicinals are over time, and to just have a plant that is going to be looked at over several years. And we've already identified probably one of the areas where it probably is not going to be grown. It probably is going to struggle through the winter, as it's a really cold climate there. So that's leopard lily, Iris domestica. That's the first perennial we have. And then we went with astragalus. Astragalus is a super popular herb. It's become really popular in the West. It traditionally came from TCM, a really pretty amazing immune system stimulant. and it's great for the soil. It's a nitrogen fixer. So, and again, some people had some issues with germination here, because it is that perennial medicinal. It doesn't necessarily all germinate at once. And again, this is something that we need to be looking at, because leopard lily, the previous plant, and astragalus, like this perennial, the roots are harvested after 3 years. So this adds a big component into the economic viability of growing it, because your bed is occupied on the farm for 3 years before you can harvest. And this is how I started to get into seeds. Was, okay, I want to grow this medicinal, but it's going to be 3 years before I can harvest it. But at the end of every season, I can harvest the seeds. So you are gaining, from the point of view of a farmer grower, you are gaining an income, even though it's not the main crop, which crops out after 3 years. So that's astragalus. As I said, super popular, become more and more popular in Western medicine as well. And then the next two medicinals are grown as annuals. So Tulsi basil, there's been a little bit of controversy around this basil itself. It was originally named Ramatulsi. It's now been renamed as temperate Tulsi, because it grows amazingly well in temperate climates. And it was found to be not, I think that's Ocimum africanum. Yeah, it was found not to be the sanctum, Ocimum sanctum, which it was originally classed as, but it still is a classic Tulsi. It's interesting because the seeds that I've been using actually did come from India, even though this originates in Africa. So we figured there must have been trade going on between Africa and India a long time ago. There are other Tulsis that people may be familiar with. There's Krishna, there's the Rama Tulsi, and there's the Vana Tulsi. But this one grows best in our temperate climate. Grown as an annual, it's very forgiving outside, grows super, super well. And we included this because of the increasing use of Tulsi in so many herbal products and its amazing medicinal properties. And then finally, again, because the final herb that we're growing is ashwagandha, which does grow in a climate, even though it is a perennial, we can grow it in BC as an annual. And again, it's a herb that's really become super popular in the last few years. It's one of my favorite herbs. It's loves heat, and you can harvest the root in a year. There was a lot of controversy around growing it because it is a perennial, whether the constituents would actually be available in the root after one season. And the first place that I worked growing and growing herbs and making tinctures, they did a lot of research into the 1-year-old roots of the ashwagandha, and they were actually found to be super, super medicinally active. And you can overwinter this if it's in a greenhouse in this part of the world. It's difficult, but for the amount of root that the plant puts on in the second year, it's actually more advantageous to grow 2 consecutive annual crops. So again, ashwagandha becomes super, super popular, used for recovering from any illness, whether it be a physical illness or mental illness. And it's also an amazing sleep regulator as well. So those are the 4 different herbs that we use for trial. 2, as I said, two perennials and 2 medicinals. And we're looking next year to increase our variety trials with some input from everyone here today, looking at what herbs people would like to see grown in trials. So I'm going to hand it back over to David, and I think we're going to go into some breakout rooms.
Great. So yeah, so we've got I'm gonna open up breakout rooms. I believe if Zoom is working right, you're all gonna be split into breakout rooms somewhat randomly but evenly. So we're hoping there's maybe some practitioners and some growers in each room. I don't know if the chat will be visible in during the breakout rooms. It won't be visible. I'm just responding to a question in the chat. It won't be visible in the recording. We're not sharing the chat with people afterwards. If anybody here would like to save the chat, if there's interesting information and you'd like to save it, you can do that yourself by going to the chat button. Click on the three little dots at the bottom, and then you should have an option to save chat, and that will just save it to your desktop. So if there's links or anything in the chat that you'd like to save, you're welcome to do that, but we won't be sharing it with everybody. So we have 3 questions that we're hoping to gather your input in the breakout rooms. And we can just plop them in the chat right now so that you have a heads up. Okay, so the 3 questions are: what crop would you like to see added to the variety trial for next season and why? I know there's some people, you all kind of, when you filled out your registration, there's some people here that are totally new to the idea of growing herbs and some people with more experience, and you know, everybody please feel free to respond and answer. But yeah, so the first question is, what crop would you like to see part of the variety trail in next year and future years, and why? What resources would you like to see come available to you in order to grow or procure medicinal herbs? And then we don't know if we've asked all the questions we should be asking. So the last question is just, is there a question that we should be asking that we've missed asking? So if there's something else that you would like to see this project work on, that would be really useful. So I think what we'll do is we're going to separate everybody into breakout rooms. We'll try to have one of us in each breakout room. Give us a bit of patience with the technology, but we'll go there for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we're going to come back together, summarize what we shared at the breakout room. So if you can, when you're in your breakout room, if you could sort of choose somebody, or somebody can volunteer to be the spokesperson for your breakout room. So when we come back together, we can call on you. And should we do 3 breakout rooms? Does that seem okay? So we'll just separate into 3 breakout rooms. And feel free to, I think we'll be able to see your messages in the chat. We have about 10 to 15 minutes in the breakout room. So everybody should be able to, you know, speak for a couple minutes at least. And then we'll come back together. We'll give you there'll be a warning, sort of a 60-second warning, and then we'll come back together. So I'm gonna start the breakout rooms right now. There's 3 rooms, so there's about 7 people in each breakout room. So I'm going to open it right now. Okay, I think we're all back. Hopefully there's nobody stuck in a breakout room, and hopefully that went smoothly enough. Each of us were in the breakout rooms. We were taking some notes, but it would be great to just do a quick summary. So why don't we, I can't remember which number room people were in, but why don't we just go 1, 2, 3, and we'll start with 1. And again, I
I
think
think
stuff
that
was written down, so we don't need anything super in-depth, but maybe just a brief summary of like some of the main points that came up for people.
was us. And I don't think we got to deciding who was gonna be the spokesperson, but I do have some notes so I can share some of the stuff that we discussed in our breakout room. And there's some really, really interesting insight. For the first question, there were quite a few options that the people in our group discussed. One thing was maybe trying to harvesting some plants that the medicinal part is the aerial parts instead of roots. Some other options that were mentioned were dog fennel, bay leaf, sassafras, Oregon grapes. So there were a lot of really interesting medicinal plants that were discussed, which was really, really great to see. It's cool to see how the trial may evolve in the future, taking all the input from the community. And then for resources that could be helpful for either the growers or the practitioners. One thing that was mentioned was maybe a way for practitioners to have an information of farmers, where they are located, what they're producing. So there's more ease for them to know where to source herbs instead of just using word of mouth. Then there was a mention of perhaps co-op growing, like co-op plots where people can grow together. And let me see if I'm missing anything. Oh, of course, more education for farmers on how to grow and how to harvest. And for the last question, we also discussed a little bit how to incorporate perhaps a more indigenous and an indigenous vision of the whole process of harvesting, processing, and then selling or trading herbs, and how they're not simply commodities, but much more interact much more with the environment, with each other, and with us than we can even understand. So yeah, keeping that mind open. If there's anybody that was in our group that wants to complete anything that I missed, I think, feel free to jump in now.
Okay, and if not, I think
That's
group number 2, I think that was us, right? I think Karina was gonna give a brief summary.
All right. We had lots of awesome discussion, I think, and some of the crops that folks were possibly interested in trialing were marshmallow, looking at sort of problems with rust and seeing how that works for folks. People looking for shade loving or shade tolerant plants, so using the edges on farms for folks that are farming. Licorice was another interest, and then the skullcaps, both the bical and the other skullcap, which I don't have the Latin name. And those were the ones that came up in our group. And in terms of resources, like info on how to link with buyers, which the other group mentioned, special considerations for each crop, quality assurance. Folks were interested in sort of maybe cooperative processing space, interest in learning how to or having access to testing herbs for medicinal potency, for the different properties, making sure that that's all part of quality assurance. And then the I guess the more practical, like the workshops and the resources and plans for building drying sheds, year-round calendars for when is the best time to harvest, and looking into, yeah, so the sharing of infrastructure ideas, looking into possible grants, like maybe even if we were looking into cooperative plans, like looking into grants for that. And someone mentioned like emerging something that maybe herbs would fall under within the agricultural grant area. Like some sort of cooperative space for us to share like yields per foot, just so we have an idea of how much to plant. Yeah, I guess it seems like linking between growers and practitioners and cooperatives, and then also wondering, you know, having some sort of sharing with us about like folks that are doing small scale herb farms, folks that are already doing cooperatives. We had talked to, I know there are some cooperatives out there, and sharing with us models that we can all look at and sort of give us some ideas. And I think that sums us up.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll just add one other thing because it came up in the other questions and I thought it was really interesting, is that given that we're talking about producing very local herbs, is there a market to sell fresh herbs, not actually processed and dried? Is there any interest with practitioners who right now have to source dried herbs from overseas, but if they could get them fresher, would it be of interest to get even fresher than dried herbs? I don't know the answer to that, but I thought that was interesting.
And I
Great.
guess I would expand up practitioners to also apothecaries, having connected with Anna in Victoria, who is also looking for fresh herb, John. So yeah, practitioners and apothecaries.
Great.
I took notes for group 3 here, so I'll also report back, but please jump in if I've missed something or misrepresent something. Similarly, the links between practitioners and growers came out, that wanting to have more links between practitioners and growers. It was mostly a call of growers, so knowing what practitioners want would inform what varieties we want to do for another trial. But some ideas there were ones that would sell to the general public, so the ones that are kind of more already known, like echinacea or chamomile. But then another thought that I think is pretty cool that people were into was doing an endangered or at-risk species in the next trial, because there's a lot of those. Let's see. I think this has been mentioned a few times, but the standardizations of herb prices were definitely, or knowing, like having those standards would be a resource that would be very useful. Also a resource on kind of like if there are already established kind of principles on like kind of like food safe principles, but herb safe principles, that would be really good. So like if you're selling at market, do you have to, like, how do you offer the product and what are those rules or standards there? Yeah, there may be some resources already on that, but having that shared out a little better would be good. Let's see, also just more resources in general on herb farming so that you can find out expected yields, as Karen was saying, and efficient harvesting techniques, how to do mass production, but without a tractor. And then a resource list on people. So like if there's, who are the resource people you can go to if they're particular specialization, like if they really know a ton about building a structure for your drying needs, like can you go to them? Is there a list somewhere I can go to and be like, okay, I'm going to call Kathy and she knows really well how to build a herb drying structure or something like that. Or maybe if that's not created yet, then having a way to do that, like monthly meetings or monthly calls, or just like exploring the knowledge that we have and the people who are coming together and sharing that up. And then I liked this idea for a question that we didn't ask, was what do people want to learn from this group? So again, that goes back to the monthly calls or presentation. And maybe you could even answer that. And when I do the little survey at the end, there's going to be a survey that pops or that you can click on, and you could answer that in that survey. That'd be great, because I think that would inform the whole process really well. Did I miss anything from group 3 that anybody wants to chime in on? Okay.
Okay, great. All right. Yeah, so I think the rest of the meeting, we just got about 15 minutes left. We're just sort of continuing discussion, I think. There is somebody on the call. I hope not putting you on the spot, Christian. But I would love to introduce, through this project, we've met some amazing people, and one of the groups of people we've met is Christian Spangenberg, and his group have been doing a fair amount of work on some stuff. One of the things that came up in our meeting was, is there a demonstration site that we can visit that has medicinal herbs? And I know, Christian, I believe you have one up in North Vancouver, and there might be another one in the Lower Mainland. So you can decline, but if you're interested in just giving people a brief overview of where you come from this, and if there's a way for them to visit your demo garden. I know there's a lot of people here from the Lower Mainland.
So yeah, I'm Christian. I'm a conservation researcher at the University of British Columbia. My research focuses on ex situ conservation and cultivation possibilities of Chinese medicinal plant species in North America. I'm currently doing a research project assessing Canadian botanical garden institutions for seeing how well represented Chinese medicinal plant species are in our collections. And yeah, the goal is to develop an open access database for this plant inventory data, which will also be augmented with botanical conservation assets as well. Yeah, I also I helped with setting up 2 learning gardens for Chinese medicinal plant species, one of which is, as you mentioned, David, in North Vancouver at Lutet Farm. And the other garden is, well, it's actually more of a bed. It's at the Strathcona Community Garden near Chinatown, where this year I helped to introduce Chinese medicinal plants to just now a whole bed of 20 different species we have growing there. But yeah, no, the site at Lutet Farm is still quite active even after 4 years, and there's currently a group of 5 of us, three TCM practitioners, myself, and another researcher from UBC who were involved with stewarding it. And yeah, we'd be happy to invite folks to come and visit us if you'd like.
Great, excellent. And I know that there's somebody through Christian's group as well, Lily Liu, who is actually offering a course this year through, we did share it with the list, but maybe if there's some of you that weren't on that list, we will pop a link into the chat. I believe it starts in a couple weeks, and so it looks like registration still available if people are interested and they happen to be in the Lower Mainland.
Yeah, and just to add a bit to that, David, Van Dusen actually in the last year has been doing quite a bit of programming with Chinese medicinal plants, through Lily, of course, but there's also been a bit of a concerted effort to expand their medicinal plant collection, and also their Sino-Himalayan collection. I'm someone involved with them to update their collection records and to suggest priority species that they can add. And I'm sort of hearing through the grapevine some rumors that this year they're adding a bed of Chinese medicinal plant species as well. So Van Dusen might potentially be another site for Chinese medicinal plant species.
Okay, cool. Oh yeah, and there's somebody asked about other groups to join, and we did in our breakout room mention the Lilium Initiative. So there's Lisa just dropped a link for that in the chat. Yeah. Kimmy has her hand up. If you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, that'll be great. And feel free
Hi,
to
thank you.
jump in if you have questions for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, I just before you I was glad that you just asked Christian to speak because I thought, oh, it was so great that he was in my breakout to realize, oh yeah, there's researchers. So maybe there could be some concerted effort to do outreach to herb schools where practitioners are training, university programs where people like Christian are studying herbs, like all the different herb traditions like Western herbalism and like maybe suggest research projects that would be to our benefit locally and just to build the network to include the research element as well and the students, like the student herbalists who are currently learning herbalism but really don't know what the plants look like, and they're not actually given much education about the actual plants. They just sort of know them as arriving in the mail. So that would be really cool. And
Thank you.
I have some contacts with some Western herbal schools that I could send your way.
Yeah, that would be great. Please do. That's an excellent suggestion. I know as somebody who worked for a farm that marketed to restaurants a lot, we always used to give tours to the chef schools because they haven't chosen their customers yet and they're going to end up in a restaurant and then they're going to contact you. So that is the equivalent of that, I guess. Get them while they're learning about the herbs, and then when they get out of school, they'll know where to purchase them. Are there any other questions? If you don't feel like you want to speak, feel free to throw them in the chat. But if you'd like to either just unmute yourself and speak up or raise your hand. Okay, John?
Yeah, just a question. Are there farms out there currently that have a viable, business case for growing herbs and selling herbs? And how are they doing it? I just imagine, entering into competition with broad acre overseas farming, dried herb production is not really going to be a possible access, but maybe they're doing it, or I'm just curious how people are making it work.
Does anybody here have an answer to that? I know we've been exploring it, and we've, as part of this project, that is one of the things we've been trying to do. So we have identified and started reaching out to a couple farms. Yeah, if anybody knows of any, thanks, Stacy. Feel free to throw them in the chat. That'll be useful for us moving forward.
There are quite a few farms down in Washington and Oregon State. That's something I was going to see if people were interested in potentially field trips down to those farms to see how their operations are working. We haven't located. There's one medicinal plant farm in Chilliwack, but they're not totally open to the project yet. So, but yeah, Oregon and Washington, definitely there are quite a lot of medicinal herb farms there, who I'm in contact with pretty regularly through the Lilium Initiative, and they're very keen to have people go visit. So if it's something that people are interested in, we could potentially organize field trip workshops down there, or invite those people to an event like this. So yeah, if there's an interest to tour down there, that would be cool.
Would there be
So there are people doing it, and it is financially viable.
would a virtual sort of presentation from one of those farms be something people here would be interested in? If we can, I think an in-person tour to a farm is definitely the thing to aim for, but you know, if we can't do that, would people be interested in having a virtual presentation by, okay, I see some thumbs up.
Okay.
Great. Maybe those of us who are able to go down can go down and we'll broadcast it for the rest of you. We'll zoom you in somehow. Great. Awesome. Well, we're kind of near the end of the time. I'd like to just respect everybody's time today. Before we leave, we would love if you could fill out just a little survey. Lisa just plopped it in the chat. You can click on that so it pops up in your browser. They're just short questions. If you attended the Salt Spring survey workshop, it's the same survey we ask everybody that attends workshops, and it's a way for us to just find out if this was helpful and what else would be helpful moving forward. So if you could, whoever's here, fill that out, that would be really great. There was a question in the chat, just are there any conferences for herb growers? I believe there's one on the island, isn't there?
It's not necessarily, it's for herbalists. And
Okay.
that's definitely something that I did actually propose to them that we presented there, but it wasn't approved. So I don't know that there are any dedicated conferences. It's starting to happen. I think that's something that the Lilium Initiative is starting to put forward and propose and start to actually come up with a conference for medicinal herb growers. Yeah, I don't know of any dedicated, but there are a lot of herbalist conferences, like a lot, all over North America. But it's trying to get this link between herbalists and growers happening. And as I said, I did put an application into the Vancouver Island conference that happens. I think it's every 2 years that it happens. So hopefully next time, they usually do one in November as well, a virtual one in November. So hopefully we will be invited to that. So, but if I hear of anything, it will be put out to people for sure.
Stacy, you have a question?
I was just gonna let you know, I think for the herbal gatherings, it like alternates. So one year it's on the island and then the other year it's in the Kootenays. So they kind of take turns hosting. And the one on the island is at Chanchel's farm up near Comox.
Yeah, Innisfree Farm.
Yes, that's the one.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for attending. This was excellent. We will probably will make the recording available to the people who signed up and couldn't attend, and possibly just put it up on our YouTube channel for other people to be able to explore this project. And yeah, if there's no last minute pressing questions, then that's great. We'll see you later, and feel free, just we'll keep this meeting open for a bit just in case you want to go through the chat. There's some links to the courses. There's a link to sign up if you aren't already on if you haven't already signed up to be informed of future things to do with this project, you can sign up there. And that's great. If not, we'll see you next time, maybe up in Smithers.